everybody and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm doing a bit of a art supply comparison video, and here I have my old watercolor set, which is a Koh-I-Noor set. This is the set that I started out using my watercolors with, and on the left hand side I also have my sort of newer set of Sennelier watercolors. These are artist grade, very expensive watercolors, and yeah, after I kind of moved on from the student grade, I moved on to the artist grade because that's what I wanted to do. So today we have three parts of this video. First part is basically just the swatching of each color in each set, and here I am starting off with the Koh-I-Noor set. Now this isn't the regular Koh-I-Noor set, it is a set of 24 I believe, and it's the Brilliant color set, so slightly different colors to the other set that they have. But yeah, this watercolor set actually did me well for when I was starting out. I'm not knocking this set in this video, however I really wanted to do a sort of comparison between the two, because when I started out wanting to get into watercolors, I did want to look up the benefits of getting a sort of cheaper set versus a more expensive set, and yeah. So first thing I noticed when doing this was that these watercolors, they are quite bright and nice, however they do take a bit more effort to activate in the palette. As you can see, there's sort of me mixing around the water a bit, and I did cut a bit more of that out so that it was a little bit less boring. However, the colors are nice and they are bright. I couldn't get them extremely dark. A few colors are pretty dark, say the purples and that kind of thing. However, moving on to this Cinelli set, instantly by swatching it, I could tell straight away that once you add that water, it basically instantly activates, and it is way more pigmented than the last set. As you can see here, the colors are a lot deeper and more intense, so it's a lot easier to get some darker tones with these colors versus the other set. However, they are still good, and you know what, a few of these colors here aren't as deep as the others, and basically these are the more sort of brighter colors, so the yellow and the green, and I think those are more opaque kind of colors, so yeah. Now back onto the Koh-I-Noor set here. This is basically just the sort of testing phase for this video. As I said, there's three parts. So basically what I'm doing is I'm just doing a few little tests here and there to see how these watercolors act compared to each other. Now first off, we had me sort of testing off a little wet on wet sort of bloom effect. Now that's basically where I just add some water onto the page and then I just drop the paint down and see how it spreads and how easily it spreads, and if I have to sort of mix it around a bit. Now the second is me basically just seeing how the paints act with one another and how easily I can sort of mix them on the page. Now the next is me basically just adding a little stroke, and now what I'm going to do with that is basically add some more layers over the top and see how I can reactivate that paint. Now with the purple, that is basically just me testing how much I can lift off, because sometimes if I have a little mistake, I like to get a tissue and dab that and sort of lift the paint off the page and see how much I can actually do that and if it stains the page. Now I am just layering some paint over that line that I did before. Now I made sure that it was properly dry so that I could do a sort of glazing effect and see how well I can reactivate it. And I also used a bit of clean water as well, to see how well I can reactivate the paint with that. Now going on the test here with the Sennelier watercolors, which are the more expensive artist grade ones, the first thing I noticed was that these spread out and do that sort of watercolor bloom effect a lot easier than the last ones, probably because I didn't have to use as much paint, so it was a bit more watery, and because I was able to get a lot of pigment on just with a tiny bit of paint, it spread out so nicely and I practically didn't have to mix it at all. Now with the seeing how they mix together on the page, yeah, I noticed that these are a lot more pigmented, so I was able to get some nice deeper colors to mix together. And yeah, they actually mixed a lot nicer, and sort of, I wasn't trying to get a gradient per se, I was just trying to see how they interact on the page. Now with that sort of purple tissue sort of test, I noticed straight away that it just lifted off so much more with the Sennelier. Look at that, that's like, I know it's not gone, however it is a lot lighter than say the Koh-I-Noor set. Now testing how they interact and if they sort of reactivate on the page and how they sort of layer, I noticed that the Cinelli did reactivate a lot more than the Koh-I-Noor. Basically what it means by reactivating is basically letting the paint dry out completely and then adding more paint or water over the top to see if they activate, like turn back into paint kind of thing. So here is the swatches and the tests of the Koh-I-Noor set. Now, they did pretty well. They are quite vibrant and nice. However, I feel that, especially with that second test, you can sort of see that I kind of, like, they didn't mix as well as the bloom effect kind of spread out a little bit more at the end, and I wasn't able to get those sort of nice little variances. Now here with the Sennelier, you can see that the yellow and the green mixed a whole lot, and it reactivated a lot. And yeah, I find that the Sennelier, they do look darker, but that's mainly because they are very pigmented, so you are able to get deeper colors. So they are so vivid and bright, and you can sort of get more range of values, I believe. Now that's not knocking the Koh-I-Noor set, they actually did me quite well when I first started out watercolors, especially since I didn't want to commit to a very expensive brand when I wasn't sure if I wanted to be serious with it or not, but yeah. Now the third part of this video today is me basically doing an illustration with both of these watercolors. Now I wanted to do the exact same illustration with both of these paints, and the paper I'm using today is my Fabriano hot pressed studio watercolor paper. Now basically what I did was that I just drew a sketch in my sketchbook, and I didn't film this part, but I inked both of them and I sort of traced the line art onto another piece of watercolor paper. And that's just because I wanted to print it out, but I know that my printer ink is not waterproof, so I had to line both of these. So starting off with the background, I had to do a sort of cloudy background because that's what I wanted to do. And yeah, I find that it was a little bit more effort to sort of get that sort of bloomy, cloudy look. And once it dried, it kind of lost the details that I really wanted to do with these Koh-I-Noor set. But you know what, that's okay because I'm testing this out. I'm not trying to make a perfect illustration with these. I'm just seeing how they do in an illustration and then compare them to each other. Now for the idea for this illustration, basically what happened was I was looking up prompts from Jazz's Arty Games app, and yeah, I ended up actually combining two prompts together because I don't know, I just thought that it might be interesting. Now the first prompt I used was a tropical island that has blue grass and features half-buried bones. Now I didn't want to just do a regular tropical island because I felt like that was a bit boring and overdone, so I ended up going with a floating island. Now the next prompt which I combined together was an ancient temple that has been burnt by fire and features a pink tree. So as you can see, I added a little bit of a temple in there, and I made the trees pink, and the burned by fire part, I'm just going to say there's a volcano, and sometime in the past it erupted and killed everyone that lived at that temple. Yep. So back to the art, I'm figuring out here that it is a little bit difficult with the Koh-I-Noor to try and get deeper sorry, that was my phone, to try and get deeper shadows. I had to do a lot of layers over the top of the green and the blue just to try and keep it nice and bright, because when it started to dry, it sort of started to get a little bit less intense, and I wanted to keep those details and those shadows in there. I also found that I had to mix a lot more paint with the water as compared to my Senneliers, because they are less pigmented. I'm guessing they have a bit more filler in them just to try and keep the costs down, which is not a bad thing. However, it means I have to mix more paint with the water, which means the paint has a very slightly thicker consistency compared to my Sennelier, which means that I couldn't get the tiny details down that I really wanted to get. Also, I sort of wanted to make the rocks underneath a very sort of dark, sort of grungy looking rock. However, it was a little bit difficult to try and get those shadows down. I ended up having to add a lot of brown and blue and stuff in there to try and get it to look a bit darker. So here is the final Koh-I-Noor set, and now basically onto the Cinelli watercolor painting. Now instantly I found that that bloom effect with the Cinelli just looked so nice and pretty, and to be honest, it was a lot less effort to get it to spread, and it actually dried a lot better than the Koh-I-Noor set. I find that when doing that bloom effect, because of the extra pigment in these paints, I feel that it sort of keeps the details. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's just my own personal views on it. And yeah, it actually ends up being a lot more like cloudy than my last illustration. Now starting off on the ground, I found that I was able to get a lot more deeper colors, and I was able to use less paint and still get a nice even coverage. And yeah, I actually found that I really liked that. Because I was able to get a deeper color in this ground sort of effect, it does have a slightly different looking color palette. However, it is closer to what I was trying to get in the beginning. So I'm going to say that the Sennelier did a better look. Even though the Koh-I-Noor does kind of look like it's brighter, I was trying to not get the rocks underneath to be bright. So now with this floating island type thing, I just want to say that I really like the idea of like stuff sort of falling off the floating island. So I actually decided to do a bit of lava flowing out from underneath the island, and a bit of water from a lake type thing dripping off the island, and also a bit of sand dripping off the island. And I noticed later that that's the primary colors, red, blue and yellow. So I actually really like that I chose to do that. So as I said before, with the deeper, richer colors of the Sennelier set, I was able to get more shadows and defined sort of highlights in this one. And yeah, that's one thing I do really like about this illustration, is the shadows and highlights just look really contrasty and nice. And it was actually a lot less effort, because with the Koh-I-Noor I had to sort of go back in and add more and more and more layers just to get those shadows deep enough. But with the Cinelli set, I was able to do that a lot easier. So I feel like you can get good results with the student grade set. They're not bad at all. For the price, they're actually pretty good. However, it does take a little bit more effort to make a finalized illustration compared to the Cinelli. After that, basically in both, I just went over with my gel pen, because that's just what I do with my illustrations. So yeah, so here is the final results of the Sennelier set, and I really like the sort of dark grunginess of the rocks underneath, and the bright colors of the sand and the blue and the orange, and I think that it looks pretty nice. It's not my favorite sort of illustration, however, I wasn't trying to make the best illustration. I was just kind of trying to do the same thing with both so that I could sort of compare them. So I hope you liked this video. It's not really a which is better basically, because they are very different and one costs a whole lot more and the other's sort of made for people starting out. So yeah, it's basically just like a comparison type video. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Make sure you hit like and subscribe and support my channel by watching another video in the cards, and I will see you in my next video. Bye everyone!